Coming up, did a national writer slight Tua Tagovailoa with his quarterback rankings? We'll try to decide next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad you're with us. We're going to talk about the SEC here today. Love a chance to sort of chop some of this up. A lot of quarterbacks in the show. A little bit of recruiting chatter here and there. It should be a fun one.
We also got a conversation going on about Andrew Thomas. I love talking about offensive line.
Oh, this guy's the biggest offensive
I can't
lineman
wait to talk about
in the world. Some of you may not know who Andrew Thomas is yet. I think a lot of Georgia fans think by the end of the season, he could pretty well be a household name around the SEC. We'll discuss him coming up. First, though, item number one on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So USA Today's Paul Meyerberg comes up with his list of top 10 quarterbacks for the 2018 season in college football. But Tagovailoa from Alabama doesn't make the list. He's sort of, I guess the best way to describe this, an honorable mention. The other SEC quarterback that just outside the top 10 that gets mentioned is South Carolina quarterback Jake Bentley. But he's not one of the SEC quarterbacks on the list, one of the top 10 guys nationally overall. And I guess I'm curious to find out your opinion on this. I think there's a way of looking at this that feels like a bit of a slight to Tagovailoa. Yes, he hasn't played a lot of football, and while I think it would be wrong to rank him on the very top of the list in terms of quarterbacks in college football, he is, after all, the presumptive starter for the presumptive preseason number one team in the country, Alabama. Are we really to believe there are 10 quarterbacks better than Tua Tagovailoa? Did USA Today get it wrong by not having Tua officially in its top 10 for national quarterbacks?
Now, do I think we'll get towards the end of the year and say, boy, that was dumb? Maybe.
Well, let's punt on that idea. Based on what you think you know right now, admittedly a small window of football, but as I said, he's the starter for Alabama. Are there 10 quarterbacks right now better than Tua?
I think right now, yes, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the ranking for right now. And I understand, Alabama fans might be upset about it. I understand when you look at Tua, there's a possibility he throws for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns or whatever you want to say. I mean, you can say whatever you want to about Tua. The fact of the matter is, I'm one of those guys that values the experience. I did the same thing with Jarrett Stidham last year. I'm kind of sitting in the same kind of way with Jake Fromm right now before I put some of these guys over the edge. I have to see them take the field. I have to see them be able to do it. Tua has not shown me enough of that yet to say, hey, top 10 of quarterbacks. Now, we had CBS Sports List on here. They had him ranked number 2, kind of projecting what it could be. And I said on the show at the time, I think that's a little bit ridiculous. I mean, I think it's ridiculous at that point to put a guy who hasn't started a game as a number 2 quarterback in the country. So as it sits right now, I'm fine with Tua being off the list.
Kenneth Clow, and I hope I pronounced that name correctly in our Facebook comment section, says, what about the guy's experience in the SEC? It's obviously limited in comparison to Jake Fromm, who is on this list, Jarrett Stidham, who is on this list, and Drew Locke, who is on this list. Tua Tagovailoa obviously has a lot less experience than that. But one of the things that I think makes these debates fun, while it seems to be a bit of a conversation stopper to say, well, he hasn't played enough to be on there. Okay, so let's go back to what we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's start picking teams. Let's start making trades. You're an Alabama fan.
Yeah.
Are you trading Tua Tagovailoa for Drew Locke? Are you trading him for Khalil Tate or one of these national quarterbacks? Are you trading Tua Tagovailoa for one of these guys that you have seen more of? It'd be okay if you were. It'd be okay if you're not. My guess is a lot of Alabama fans aren't trading Tua Tagovailoa. So from that standpoint, there is a projection that you do in your mind. And even if you haven't seen a lot of football, you've seen enough to at least think, you know what? He probably ranks higher on the list than this.
Well, and I think it goes into also asking the question, what are these guys asked to do? All right? I mean, we also have to put it in projections in terms of what are the offense. I don't think Khalil Tate runs a similar style to Jarrett Stidham. I don't think Jarrett Stidham runs a similar style to Jake Fromm. I don't think Jake Fromm runs anything close to what Drew Locke's being asked to do. I think Trace McSorley's probably a good mix of all of them. It breaks down into what we're asking these guys to do. So do I want to trade Khalil Tate? Absolutely not. Do I think there's the opportunity that Khalil Tate wins a Heisman Trophy next year? Absolutely, just because the things he's asked to do are so much different. It's like I said, we can project all we want to. We can look at the top 10 right now. I think by the end of the year, Tua is going to be one of the best 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the country. But I'm okay with right now because I see Tua and I see a guy who hasn't started a game. I see a guy who already, the expectations are through the roof. And I'm okay with sitting him right there at 11, 12, 13 because I think in the end he will make his case to be at the top of that list.
Well, obviously he's got to improve based on where he was as a true freshman in 2017 when he wasn't really even the starter for Alabama. Didn't come in as officially the quarterback until the second half of the national championship game. Back during spring practice, and that's one of the things that Nick Saban did discuss. Now, Tua was hurt, did not go through a lot of Alabama spring practice, but there's still sort of an idea that Nick Saban has for what an improved version of Tua Tagovailoa, what it looks like. Here is what Nick Saban had to say about that.
Tua is just naturally instinctive as a passer, but I think the other parts of the game is something that he needs to grow and develop in. But he was just a freshman, and he probably didn't play as much as maybe I would have liked for him to play to be able to develop some of those skills. But that's going to be the key for him, is to gain a respect for taking care of the ball. And like a lot of guys that are really good passers, they think they can always make that throw. They think they can always get it in there, and that's good to a point, but you also got to be smart about when you take those chances.
Morgan Recton in our YouTube comment section says he's on the road today, but he's still listening. Morgan, we certainly appreciate that over there on the YouTube comment section. You hear some interesting words there from Nick Saban in terms of how Tua Tagovailoa is supposed to progress and grow here in his sophomore season of 2018. And I realize what some people say when they look in on a conversation like this. They'll say, oh, this is ridiculous. What does it matter if he's ranked in the top 10 or not? Well, here's why I do think this matters, and here's why I think this is more than just sort of fodder for a mid to late June discussion here. I am curious to find out, as an expert, and I consider you an expert because you played the game, and you're certainly plugged in, much the same way our audience is, to the inner workings of the SEC in terms of what we see on each of these fall Saturdays. Is there a chance that he disappoints? I mean, is this one of those deals of, hey, he had the validation of being the five-star quarterback, he had the trust of Nick Saban as sort of his closer in the second half of a national championship game? I mean, Saban put a firmly established starter, one of the great players conceivably in the SEC going into the playoff, Saban put him on the bench in favor of Tua Tagovailoa. That's a lot of faith that Saban would have had to have in Tua. Is there a chance, even a small chance, is there a chance it's misplaced? Is there a chance that a lot of the hype, and you and I on this show have contributed to that hype, is there a chance there's too much hype for Tua Tagovailoa and the wait-and-see approach really is the right one to take?
I think there's always the chance, and I've seen it happen. I've seen five-star guys that never saw the field. I've seen two-star guys that ended up being three-year starters. I've seen it all. There's always the chance that it doesn't work out. I think that's why we project so much. That's why we look at what Tua could possibly be. And you're right. I mean, Jalen Hurts was built up to be everything going into. I mean, he was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year as a freshman, as a true freshman. So he was built up to be a ton. There's always the chance that Tua comes up short. Now, I don't think it's going to be with his arm. I don't think it'll be with his legs. I don't think it'll be, running the offense. I think if you have to weigh and kind of risk anything when you look at Tua, it's, hey, is he going to fumble the ball a lot? Is he going to miss some of the handoffs? Is he going to make some ill-advised throws? Like Nick Saban said, is he going to try to do too much? That's the biggest question for Tua, because this is an Alabama football team that have had some good quarterbacks, but you haven't had an air raid offense. You haven't had anything close to what Tua might bring to the table. So is he going to try to do too much? Is he going to try to show out too much? Is he going to look at a top 10 list and say, you know what? I belong on that list. Watch this arm right here. I think they always run that risk.
Cliff Nelson, by the way, I mentioned Morgan Recton listening on the show because he's driving today. Cliff Nelson says, hey guys, can't stay today. Work's kicking my butt. Have a great show. Cliff, we appreciate you being here. And for all of you that check in, you check out, hey, we know you've got busy stuff going on during the day. We're just thankful you spend some time with us when you can. We really appreciate that. You'll also be happy to know that there is a BA's daddy.
I saw that. I was waiting. I'm mad that you brought it up because I was waiting on a comment to come out that I could say, Brandon Adams' daddy says,
Mike has always had a bit of a love-hate relationship with Mike Johnson's daddy, which has been one of our longtime YouTube commenters. But there's a BA's daddy in there now, so that's kind of cool to see. All right, item number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. So Tua Tagovailoa does not make the USA Today list of top 10 quarterbacks nationally, but Jarrett Stidham does. And Stidham is actually, and this is where you're going to get kind of interesting here because you've called for a little more attention towards Stidham. Well, Stidham gets it as the highest rated quarterback on the list overall. In fact, here's what Paul Meyerberg from USA Today said in regards to why Stidham ranks where he ranks. It's no coincidence that Auburn is nearly unbeatable when Stidham has room to operate. As he goes, so goes the Tigers. There's enormous reason for optimism when it comes to Stidham. Stidham got his feet wet as a freshman at Baylor in 2015 and had his down moments for Auburn in 2017. With the byproduct of this experience, almost inevitably, a push is going to come for all conference and national recognition. Once again, that's Paul Meyerberg from USA Today. So does this validate something you've been kind of pitching to us for a while here in the Drew Locke, Jake Fromm, Tua Tagovailoa discussion that maybe Jarrett Stidham ought to get more attention? Well, this August body of journalists at USA Today ranks him number 1 among SEC.
And I think he should be. And I'm okay with this list. I really am. I looked at this list up and down and I thought, well, Stidham and then Drew Locke at 7 and Fromm at 9 and Browning right behind that. I'm good with that. I think this is the order, in my opinion, that we should be talking about. Now, I think you can obviously make the argument for Jake Bentley. There's going to be people who make the argument for Nick Fitzgerald. There's going to be people who make the argument for Tua to be on that list. But I'm okay with Stidham at 5 as the SEC's top-ranked quarterback right now. And maybe, and I do have to call myself out a little bit. Maybe this is me doing a little bit of what I accuse Sports Illustrated of doing and saying, hey, listen, if Devin White was on a better team, this guy might be up in the top 20, top 30. If this guy was in a different circumstance, maybe that's how I look at Drew Locke. But I don't see that experience this year for Drew Locke playing out the way I do for Jarrett Stidham.
So the point that I've made on this show before, though, is in this cluster of SEC quarterbacks, I don't know that there's an overwhelming argument to take one over the other, but there also may not be an overwhelming argument to disregard one. Maybe Drew Locke, I don't like his completion percentage. I think he's going to play on a bad team. So if you just want to keep it to the 3 guys that were sort of at the top of the heap last year in terms of their teams, 2 at Bama, Stidham at Auburn, Jake Fromm at Georgia, you seem to like the idea of ranking Stidham above the others, but do you think there's an overwhelming reason why Stidham ought to be ranked above them?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And that's what's interesting about it. And you could go, honestly, you could do a round robin with the 3 of them, and I don't know that any fan base would trade their guy for another guy. Honestly, I don't. I don't know that Auburn fans look at it and say, boy, I don't think Auburn fans would trade Jarrett Stidham for Jake Fromm or Tua right now. I think they like what they have in Stidham. I don't think Georgia fans are getting rid of Fromm. So I think that everybody has a classic argument. But it goes back to what I said a minute ago. What are these guys asked to do within these offenses? Mississippi State fans could have this gripe. Nick Fitzgerald might be the best running quarterback out of all of them. Jake Bentley, with a speed-up offense, with some of the things, the RPOs he's going to be asked to do, he might be better at that. I think they're all good at different things. It's just the dynamic and the situations. The reason I put Stidham ahead of those other guys is just the wins that Stidham was able to accomplish last year as opposed to a Drew Locke.
And as we talked about yesterday on the show, one of the things for Jarrett Stidham here in 2018 is a chance at more decision-making, audibling at the line of scrimmage. Apparently that freedom is going to be available to Stidham here in 2018 in a way that it wasn't for 2017, in a way maybe it's never been for any Auburn quarterback before. Stidham said at Manning Passing Academy in Louisiana this week, that's an option and a level of freedom that he's really looking forward to. Here is Jarrett Stidham on that.
Now that I understand what we're doing on offense, I know how they're thinking. Having the ability to check plays on my own and to get us into certain things, against certain coverages, whatever it may be. We've talked a lot about that, and I think, you'll see this year that kind of progress for myself.
A little bit of a competition to hear Stidham there, given the fact there are other people speaking at the same time there at the Manning Passing Academy. What he's talking about is the freedom he gets to enjoy with more chances to audible here in 2018. And as Gus Malzahn got a little bit defensive about last season, that he felt like Stidham already had a good bit of freedom back in 2017. Here is Gus Malzahn from last October on that subject.
Jarrett probably has more flexibility than any quarterback that we've had since I've been in college, just from the standpoint to change protections, the RPOs, and the decision-making. He probably has more freedom than any quarterback we've had.
William Lay in the YouTube comment section says that Tua's got a great running back and stacked wide receiver group. Obviously, in comparison to Auburn, that seems less so. Less proven wide receivers at Auburn, certainly less proven running backs. Maybe that's a knock on Stidham. I don't buy John Pendergrass, though, who says that Jarrett Stidham's going to fall flat on his face this year. Maybe Stidham doesn't live up to the hype, but there is, to me, very little in common between Jeremy Johnson, the Auburn quarterback we saw get overhyped and falter in 2015, and Jarrett Stidham, who, let's face it, he showed some flashes at Baylor. Stidham had a good year a year ago. He's already proven that he's not a bust.
Jeremy Johnson's more Sean White than Jarrett Stidham ever thought about being. And listen, it goes to what I was saying. Listen, you can put numbers up. We can put Nick Fitzgerald's touchdowns and interception ratio up against Jake Fromm's and up against Drew Locke's. It's all about who they're asked to do it against and what they're doing inside of these games, in my opinion. We can break it down 6 ways towards the weekend. One guy has a higher completion percentage. The other guy did it against different teams. The other guy's ratios was better. I don't know. Yards per attempt. Break it down all you want to. Each of these guys would have a grade.
Bradley Bush in our Facebook comment section. And by the way, I'm going to apologize again for the Facebook stuff. I'm still having some issues with that. So if I'm not seeing your Facebook comment, I guess you can keep posting it. I'm just having some issues reading the Facebook comments. They've been posting in kind of a weird pattern. One that I did see that I thought was interesting, Bradley Bush mentioning that he thinks, and Bradley's an LSU fan, but he thinks that Tua is going to be shaking his boots when he goes on the road to Death Valley to play LSU this season. And I guess that does bring up an interesting point. The national championship game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a neutral site venue. Now, there are a ton of Georgia fans back in January for that game, but there are also a lot of Alabama fans too. It's also an expensive ticket, sort of a rich crowd, maybe not overall quite as loud as the typical game is going to be, certainly not the intensity of Death Valley. Yep. Is the road environment a test that Tua Tagovailoa still has to pass this season?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, that's one of the things I'm looking for. That's why you asked me if there's any risk of a letdown. Absolutely. I mean, what are we going to get when this guy goes on the road to Baton Rouge and has to do all these things? And that's not even to say he hasn't even been named the starting quarterback. And so,
oh, please.
I knew you'd love that. But diving into it, there's always the risk. I mean, there's always a miscommunication. There's always a handoff that can go wrong. Maybe fans have seen it. Jalen Hurts and this style of offense that he kind of brought along with Lane Kiffin, it's not something they're used to seeing. The missed handoffs, the missed mesh points, not throwing it out of somebody that's flaring out of the backfield. That's something he's going to have to adjust to. And that's one of the scary things about the small window. Yes, he rose to the occasion. Yes, he did it with a national championship winning team in hindsight, but can you do it on the road? Could you have come back in that game at Mississippi State like Jalen did? I'm not sure.
Item number 3 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Thought Jordan McPherson had an interesting piece up at the Miami Herald looking at the state of recruiting in the state of Florida. You've got Mark Richt getting his roots planted there in Miami. You've got Willie Taggart starting the Florida State program, and Dan Mullen getting things going at Florida. This is a time when 3 coaches, all 3 are looking to build momentum, and also a time when the Sunshine State's as loaded with talent as has been in quite some time. Let me show you a little bit of what McPherson wrote there for the Miami Herald. He says, considering Florida and Florida State accomplished top 15 class while transitioning to new coaching staffs, the possibility of all 3 programs having top 10 classes at the end of the 2019 cycle, something that hasn't happened since 2012, is a development to watch. After all, Florida has a nation-high 64 of the top 500 prospects from this recruiting cycle, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite ranking. So what McPherson's writing there at the Miami Herald is that we have a chance to see all 3 of these programs maybe get into the top 10 for the 2019 cycle in recruiting, just based on the fact that Mullen and Taggart and Richt are all trying to really make a big push for recruiting at a time in which the state of Florida is just loaded with prospects. But the issue here, and Gators fans who we focus on here on SEC Country Live certainly know, is that the gap between Miami and Florida State and Florida right now is pretty wide. If you look at the 24/7 Sports Composite team ranking, Florida State certainly currently 12. Miami currently 13th. It's Florida that's outside the top 30 right now when it comes to those 24/7 Sports Composite team rankings for the class of 2019. If you're a Florida fan, how much should this concern you right now?
It's a huge concern for me. And, I've been high on Dan Mullen. I've been high on him down at Florida. I've been high on the fact that he does more with less, but he shouldn't have to do more with less. And if you're going to say, hey, listen, look what he did at Mississippi State. Imagine what he'll do with the talent he can get at Florida. He's got to get that talent. And there is talent at Florida right now. But guess what? The depth is not there right now. The depth, if you look in the 2 deep and the 3 deep at Florida, there's not 5-star prospects waiting. There's no more CeCe Jeffersons. There's no more Martez Ivies. There's no more, Van Jefferson trying to transfer in. Yes, I think that he will climb in the rankings. But the scary thing for me looking at Dan Mullen is not so much where he ranks. It's when you look at his commitments, none of them are earth-shattering. I mean, we're talking about guys in the 247 composite rankings that are 88s, 87, 3-star guys normally that you wouldn't see Florida really taking that much. And so far right now, that's what their whole class is comprised of.
I like Bull Gator's comment on YouTube. It says, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just going to have to try to trust Mullen and see how this unfolds. And I think that's a good perspective from a Florida fan. And obviously, those of you that watch the show every day know that I'm a Georgia fan. And, obviously, Florida's one of my favorite teams' big rivals. So let me play devil's advocate for a moment and try to actually defend Florida on this. Obviously, there's a part of me that'd love to see Florida not do well in recruiting. Y'all know that's true. So let me try to play the opposite side of this and at least play devil's advocate on Florida here for a moment. If I was a Florida fan, here's what I would put hope and faith in. That one commit can change a lot of stuff. One commit has a way of making dominoes fall. Now, right now, is Florida going to get that commit? I don't know. I thought you brought up a really good point. Sometimes the real reason to be worried for a college football fan with recruiting is not the recruits your team doesn't get, it's the commits you do take.
Yeah.
Because that gives you an idea of what your coaching staff feels is out there for you. When you start taking players who are very lowly ranked, maybe your coaching staff just doesn't feel like it has all that much to gain with some of the top prospects in college football. But if Florida could later on get a Trey Sanders, whose brother Olmstead is a currently preferred walk-on at Florida, may eventually get a scholarship. If that works with Trey Sanders, and Sanders at IMG Academy brings with him a bit of a coattail level where some IMG prospects start coming in here, all of a sudden one prospect can change a lot of things. Right now, I do think a fair reading of the situation in the Sunshine State does make it seem that Mark Richt and Willie Taggart have a lot more recruiting momentum. I won't deny that. But in defense of Florida, to the extent that I can, I will say that this kind of stuff has a way of changing with just one commit sometimes.
And it's always possible. And I would never discount the fact that Dan Mullen can get it flipped around. Maybe there's a game plan back in there we don't know. Maybe he's got his eye on a group of guys. Maybe it's going in and offering somebody's. But right now, what it points at is this. There's not a top 200 prospect in the class right now. They've got 10 commitments for 2019. There's not a top 200. There's not an ESPN 150. There's not any Rivals 100, whatever you want to call it. There's nobody even close to that right now, and that's what's scary right now for Florida.
Rick Keene, who's a great Florida fan in our Facebook comment section, says, listen, it's early in the season to be so concerned about recruiting. Florida's going to put together a decent season, and the recruits will recognize that everything has changed and that Dan is the real deal. Look, Mullen was handed a broken program, but he will right the ship. Maybe Rick Keene gets proven right on this. The one thing, though, that I will disagree with the commenter on when it comes to Florida is what recruits at this level really buy in on more is less about Florida having a good season and more about the chance for early playing time. That's what ought to concern you about Florida is right now Mullen should have early playing time to sell. Hey, come here, look, see how bad we need you. From that standpoint, as weird as it sounds, losses actually help you with recruiting sometimes because you can say, listen, I got nobody that does what you do.
Right.
This is how badly we need you. You're going to be out there playing as a freshman. That's a great sales pitch. I'm surprised that's not working more for Mullen right now because I think an objective reading of the situation would tell you that Florida needs recruits.
Yeah, no, and I think what's interesting about the comment is, yes, it's early. Yes, it's the end of June. Here's what I need to talk about, though, in terms of what that is. First of all, the recruiting cycle's changed. You can take official visits in the spring right now, so you can no longer afford to get that far behind. You can't say, boy, when we get these guys on campus, it's going to be different. Guess what? They've done the Great Gator Cookout or whatever it's called. Didn't bring that many players. Yes, it brought a couple of commits. It wasn't that big a deal. Here's what else I'll throw at you if you say you're not that concerned about Florida this early in the cycle. Why is it that Willie Taggart, why is it that Jeremy Pruitt both can have top 10, 15 classes right now and Dan Mullen's still stuck back in the 30s? I've said a million times. I've been on Florida fan side of this Dan Mullen debacle. I think he's a great hire. I think X's and O's wise is going to do great things this year. But that's concerning if you're looking at what else is going on around you with some of these other first-year head coaches, and Dan Mullen's not even sniffing it right now.
Good comment from Quentin Flanders on Facebook who says his assistants can recruit. Bama started slow too, at least based on their standard. Give him time. That's a good comment from a Florida fan. Michael Clyburn, though, a Mississippi State fan, feeling pretty good in the absence of Dan Mullen, says, hey, look at Mississippi State doing so much better than recruits than what Florida's doing. You know, that is hard to ignore right now.
That's a great point. And it's like I'm saying, boy, you know what? We still have a lot of time left to go. Well, all of a sudden that window got a lot closer with the December 20th early signing period. And all of a sudden the fact that these guys have, official visits in the spring, and all of a sudden now there's a dead period and everything's moving up. Everything's moving up. This is not wait and see mode anymore. I'm just telling you, if Joe Moorhead's in the top 10 right now and Dan Mullen's still back in the mid-30s, it's cause for concern.
Item number 4 here in our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. One of the things we've been talking a lot about on today's show is Paul Meyerberg's ranking at USA Today of the top 10 quarterbacks in college football. One of the quarterbacks that did make that list was Jake Fromm from Georgia. And in describing Fromm there at number 9 on the USA Today list, I thought that Meyerberg wrote something interesting, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on this. Let me show you some words here from Meyerberg, who writes about Jake Fromm that he's going to be better in 2018. Fromm will be more confident, more under control, savvier in the face of SEC defenses. Then again, he'll have more on his plate as Georgia breaks in a new backfield and a new starter at left tackle. That's Paul Meyerberg talking about Jake Fromm and what he's going to be dealing with the Georgia offense. Let's push the running backs aside for a moment because it seems like we talk about Georgia running backs a lot here on this show. New starter at left tackle. It is Andrew Thomas, who was as a freshman last year, started at right tackle, moves over to start at left tackle this season. That's a green player at that position, but a former elite prospect coming out of high school who has a year under his belt as a starter. So as an offensive lineman yourself, when you look at what USA Today sort of highlights as a potential problem for Fromm, what's your evaluation of Andrew Thomas? Is that a strength or a potential weakness for Georgia?
It's going to be a strength. There's no doubt about it. And there's a bunch of different ways to slice it. And anybody who's watched Andrew Thomas, as I know you've watched him closely, he has all the tools. I mean, the physicality is there. And this is how it usually always is when true freshmen start on the offensive line. You say, boy, the physical tools are too much to take this guy off the field. Yes, you have some, small things to learn along the way. Yes, there's technique things that he's going to get better at. Yes, I mean, he ducked his head too much at time. Yes, more savvy players can swim move on that when you're a freshman. Guess what? All of a sudden he's watching film. All of a sudden he's taking in more. All of a sudden it's a year or two under Sam Pittman. All of a sudden You're asked to do different things at left tackle, and all of a sudden you get savvier. And then all of a sudden, that mind catches up with the physical ability, and he is going to be a strength. He's too physically gifted, and having had the playing career that he already has to be a weakness for this Georgia football team. I think he's going to be incredible. Sounds
like Kirby Smart kind of agrees. If you want to go back to this past spring, one of the things that Kirby Smart said about Andrew Thomas and the transition that had already begun during spring practice is sometimes no news is actually good news. Here's Kirby on that.
I probably hadn't paid close attention to it as much as I should. I do know this, if you don't notice him, it's probably a good thing. It's not like there's popping up sacks and things. I mean, it's very quiet. It's like, okay, there's not a lot of issues over there. We hadn't got a lot of pass rush off that side. He's made the transition well.
Yeah, made the transition well from right tackle over to left tackle. And one of the things, Mike, that I think Georgia fans like about Andrew Thomas is the mindset that he brings to the program. You know, let's face it. And listen, I say this as a fan of the program. For a long time, Georgia did not have the world's greatest reputation along the line of scrimmage. Even good Georgia teams, sometimes it seemed like, had less than stellar offensive lines. This was a program at times that was just sort of thought not to be physical enough. Some of the same stuff that maybe we're saying about Texas A&M this offseason as they transition away from Kevin Sumlin. Some of that kind of stuff could have been said about Georgia teams years ago. Guys like Andrew Thomas are doing their part to try to change that reputation and help Jake Fromm in the process. In fact, here is Andrew Thomas talking about his desire to see the reputation of the Georgia offensive line become one of brute physicality. Here's Thomas on that.
Well, we just tried to change the culture, and basically we just play physical every day. And it starts in practice. We practice hard every day. It starts with our O-lines coach, Coach Pittman, and he just pushes us to be the best we can be.
So listen, I think that when you look at Jake Fromm, and is he a top 10 quarterback nationally? Once again, I mean, I don't know that there's a strong argument to rank him ahead of guys like Tua and Stidham and folks like that. There's no strong argument to disqualify him either. The one thing he has going for him, especially when compared to Jarrett Stidham, is I believe we already know a lot more about the Georgia offensive line than we do about the Jarrett Stidham Auburn offensive line.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I'm glad you brought up the Kevin Sumlin topic too, because for offensive linemen, practice is everything. And you hear him sit there and talk about what Sam Pittman and what he's doing, expecting the best out of them every day. And there's two different ways for offensive linemen to practice. First of all, as an offensive lineman, hey, is somebody going to follow my knee? I'm always looking behind me. I make sure I want to hold everybody up off the ground. There's also that tendency when you kind of pull out on some of these pulling plays to kind of, nudge up with somebody and say, boy, in the game, I'm going to level that guy, right? The best offensive lines don't do that. The best offensive lines practice at 110%. And it sounds to me that's what Georgia's going through. That's probably also what Jimbo's demanding. I think that's what Jeremy Pruitt's trying to do with his Tennessee offensive line, demanding that they get the repetition in practice that some of these softer offensive lines around the country, they don't do that on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point from a guy that knows offensive line as well as anyone possibly could. All right, let's do it. Number 5 here on our SEC Country Line first and 10 list. Congratulations, go out to Tennessee, picking up a 2019 quarterback recruit, Brian Marr from Ocala, Florida. Here is what Marr put out on social media. Committed, #GoBigOrange. He thanks folks and says he's great excitement that he's committing to the University of Tennessee. Looks good there in the orange uniform there of the Tennessee Vols with those sort of classic Twitter edits that have sort of become the official way these young men announce their decisions here in the future. And we are in kind of an unusual situation for 2019. And every time we talk about quarterbacks, I feel the need to sort of bring this up. There is no true 5-star in America right now. There is a lot of reevaluation going on where guys that got slow played eventually, and let's face it, that goes on. Programs sort of, wait to extend their committable offers. A lot of programs feel like maybe they waited a little too long on some of these guys. They got scarfed up by the program. So, Marr is an Elite 11 finalist. He was a guy that's gotten some attention on the summer circuit here this year. I have no idea where he ultimately sort of fits into the ultimate pecking order for Tennessee at quarterback. But 29 is one of those years. It's sort of like the bargain basement sale the day after Christmas. You just got to grab your item and go right now, and Tennessee's grabbed his 2019 quarterback.
Yeah, it's a game of musical chairs, right? At the quarterback position, boy, don't be left without a chair, right? When the music stops there on signing day, don't be left without somewhere to sit down. And I think that's the way you have to look at it. It is interesting to me, too, because we talked about all these rankings of Florida a minute ago. I mean, this is, in my opinion, when I saw the name come across, it was a little bit of a reach. But evidently, this guy is getting more love than I think he is. I think this is one of those guys, when you turn on the film and coaches do their own scouting, like away from kind of the ranking system, when coaches do their own scouting, I think it's the guy that jumps off the page. I think that obviously there are some guys. I mean, Texas A&M's offered him. There's a couple of other big Power 5 schools that have offered him. So good for Tennessee for at least getting their guy and somebody they obviously value more than other people do it right at this point.
Yeah, listen, I mean, my thing here is, Tyson Helton was a guy that worked at USC, which we think of as like the primetime program for quarterbacks really in the country, whether it be Matt Leinart or the guys that cycle through the program. I mean, they just had a million great quarterbacks. Helton has been out there working those guys. He's at Tennessee now. I think one of the things that you hope in the future is that Tennessee becomes a destination for quarterbacks because they get a chance to work with Tyson Helton. We've seen a revolving door for Alabama at offensive coordinator. Dan Enos they bring in now as quarterbacks coach. I think there's a chance that Enos is a one and done. I think he could be a head coach again sometime very soon. He was a good offensive coordinator at Arkansas. If you can find an offensive coordinator and keep him in the SEC and build a reputation as a tutor of quarterbacks, Jimbo Fisher's got that going for him a little bit based on the work they did at Florida State. It's a pretty good brand for your program here, and it's kind of interesting to see if Helton can work with a guy like this once he gets on campus, the guys that are already on campus, including Keller Christ, who's transferring in here this summer. Can Helton establish that relationship and make Tennessee be a destination for these quarterbacks, especially in a year like 2019 when quarterback is just sort of a lean position?
You got to hope that's what the Tennessee fans are definitely hoping. That's what they're looking at with Tyson Helton. Now, I do think there's a chance that Tyson Helton's also one of those guys that might get a little look at head coach sometime in the near future. I don't know if it's next year, like Dan Enos, like you're talking about, but some point in the near future. I also think another thing to highlight about Brian Marr is that the fact that you can go into a state of Florida at a time where, like you said, there's not a lot of quarterbacks out there. You can go into Ocala or Tampa or whatever it may be and grab some of these guys up. I think that's another way of looking at it, too. If you're coming from Florida under, all these head coaches down there that are known as quarterback tutors, and you're headed up to Tennessee, like I said, not that he's a rival's, 250 or anything top prospect, but he's going up there to get tutored under Tyson Helton.
Jeff Crawford says, speaking of Tennessee, that they've got a tough schedule, no pressure, no real expectations. Not a bad spot to bring some surprises. And I think one of those surprises, to kind of go back to this Tyson Helton conversation, is Tennessee spent a lot of time, if you look back on it, Mike, they spent a lot of time during the spring talking about up-tempo offense and talking about things that you would not expect Jeremy Pruitt to really sort of highlight as the potential hallmark of the program. And I think about Pruitt being a no-nonsense, nuts and bolts, physical lines of scrimmage, run the football. But that's not really the chatter that came out of Tennessee a lot during the spring.
Yeah.
They talked a lot about offense during the spring. So if Jeff Crawford, our Facebook commenter, is right, and it's a season with low expectations and a schedule that you may not win a lot of games, where you can have some quote-unquote surprises, no better surprise than, boy, this offense is more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
Tennessee scoring more points than I expected them to. That's something, right? I mean, I really do think this is a year, and this is not me trolling Tennessee fans. Hopefully the Vols fans that watch every day know better than to assume that. This is not a year where I think wins are going to be easy to come by for Tennessee. You mentioned yesterday, can you keep some games close? I want to balk on the idea that close games alone are enough to win over Tennessee fans. High-scoring games might be, though. Games. No, I'm serious, because they're just more fun to watch.
I agree.
I think that, listen, we are all sort of creatures of habit. We all have, we are emotional beings that justify things logically. Tennessee fans will enjoy the year more if they're losing high-scoring games more so than losing low-scoring games. They're certainly just getting obliterated.
Right.
I think that if they could surprise offensively for the majority of Tennessee fans here in year one, that might just be enough.
I agree with you, but I think it can be one and the same. First of all, when we look at what their defense could possibly be at Tennessee, having close games and having high-scoring games are going to have to probably be the same thing. You're going to have to score a ton of points with what I think that defense could possibly look like in year one under Jeremy Pruitt. But I do agree with you. And I think it goes back to something I feel about Alabama's offense or LSU's offense or Georgia's offense. Some of these really offenses that are known for strong offensive lines, those offenses can be boring when they're not good, right? I mean, we can look at, let's compare what Bama's offense has been to what Arkansas's offense have been. It's actually been very similar styles the last few years. Arkansas just haven't been very good, and it almost puts you to sleep at times because you look at it and say, boy, what they're trying to do is not working, and hopefully what Tennessee's trying to do actually works out for them.
On YouTube, Steve Quinn asks, is Ryan Helinski coming to South Carolina the best quarterback to the SEC in 2019? Well, Alabama fans might dispute that a bit with Paul Tyson and Tua Tagovailoa. Auburn fans might dispute that with the legacy quarterback there, Nix. But for my money, based on the limited things I know about these quarterbacks, I think Ryan Helinski might actually be the best. And Helinski's the perfect example of a quarterback that some programs thought they could slow play for a while. They waited too long. And in the case of Helinski, it looks like they've waited too late.
No, it does. And listen, I'm sure there's going to be Bama fans that dispute that. Anybody who's seen Tua Tagovailoa play in person will probably dispute that because I've heard nothing but incredible things. But it's hard to dispute that South Carolina has not only gotten this guy to commit, but it seems like, in the way he talks, when you listen to Ryan Helinski, it sounds like the South Carolina's gotten so far out ahead of everybody else that I don't think there's any coming back for some of the other programs that say, oh, wait, you know what? We really did want you on board. USC is one of those teams. USC has recently offered
Ohio State is a big one, too.
Yeah, and it's like, you know what? He's saying, you know what? I'm still on board with South Carolina.
Yeah, my understanding on the Ryan Helinski situation is he's going to South Carolina a couple times a month. He's having to pay his own way to do that. Remember, you only get one official visit. Any other visit you take to the campus is considered an unofficial visit. You got to foot the bill for that yourself, and Helinski keeps going back. Gives you an idea about how much he loves South Carolina. All right, let's move on here and look at item number 6 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And one of the topics we get into a lot is when it comes to new facilities in college football, what works, what doesn't. And by works, I mean what really makes your program better. And the only way you make your program better is to bring in better players. Everything else is just absolute, it's just all hogwash and nonsense. You get better as a program by bringing in better players. So how much do facilities help you become better? Well, I think some facilities help more than other. Maybe an example of that from Alabama here, who's showing off kind of a brand new, and you can help us describe this maybe a little bit better, kind of a brand new like nutrition center. This is essentially a place where the players eat, right?
Right, it's a chow hall.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. And Bama has these ways of saying, the chef's called like an executive nutrition expert.
Right,
He's a chef. He's
a
a cook.
cafeteria,
Yeah,
right.
right. It's a cafeteria. It's a chow hall. So that's what you're getting here.
Well, it's the nicest cafeteria you've ever seen. In fact, let's show it some of it to you right now. Take a look at this from Alabama's official Twitter account here. First of all, you always love like the dramatic music. I mean, this looks awesome, right?
Yeah, no, this is incredible. And I'll try to give everybody perspective on what this actually is. This used to be, where Bama players used to eat, used to be across campus in their dormitory. This is actually built on the practice football field, right next to where their facility is. So they literally leave practice and they walk in and get their food. And you'll see here in a second, I think Jonah Williams actually grilling his own steak outside.
Is that right?
Right there on the practice field on the sports.
So this is obviously personal for you because you played at this very program. I'm, just a blowhard that speaks on streaming video shows, so you know a lot more about this than I do. But here's my perspective on this. This video works. I think think about every vacation you've ever taken. You choose your vacation spot based on the food you're going to eat. Yeah. You think about when you move, the first thing you think about is, hey, which restaurants are close to me? What food am I going to get to eat? People make choices on the basis of food.
Yeah.
Showing off the food you get to eat at Alabama, I know this sounds like an idiotic thing to say, but I really do mean this. Showing off the food you get to eat at Alabama is a way to win with recruits. I don't think a weight room works the same way. I don't think people want to think about working themselves to death in a weight room. They want to be strong, but actually putting in the work is sort of an unattractive thing to spend a lot of time thinking about. That video we showed the other day of all those Tennessee players running up the ramp, nobody chooses a school because of how hard the strength coach is going to work you. But when you see a pasta station and like grilling a steak and whatever else that is, that's a video that sells to recruits.
Let me take another angle too on this, and what a lot of people probably don't realize when you're going on campus and you're making visits and you're having recruiting weekends, a lot of these teams, and it was like this at Alabama when I got there, right? They order out, they get things catered, right? You bring in this catering company, McAllister's Deli is going to do this lunch.
Yeah.
Guess what? That's not happening anymore at Alabama. These right now, those chefs are making the meals for all the recruits coming in. There's steaks, there's pastas, there's whatever you could possibly want, whatever you could order up. I mean, lobster, crab claws, all of it. And they're making those meals for the recruits that are coming in, and they're getting a chance to see firsthand what exactly they'll be eating on a daily basis.
So let me ask you this, and we'll change the subject. Sometimes when you go to like a cafeteria type thing or a buffet type thing, the food presents well, but it actually doesn't really taste that well. It just sort of tastes steamed, and all the food just sort of tastes the same, like some buffets can kind of be from time to time. Is this food that looks better than it tastes, or is it actually pretty good?
No, it's good. And listen, I've been a part of both because I had like 3 different cafeterias in the time I was at Alabama.
Okay.
When we first got there, not good food. It was like, hey, all you can eat. And it's like, the cafeteria pizza that's in the squares, like that kind of thing going on. And then it built up. And then you had good cooks. And now all of a sudden, these guys that are coming in are established like culinary experts that can actually make food that really is top of the line.
Jared Seegers noticed that you mentioned the idea of getting some crab legs. Jared Seegers said, hey, we could have gotten Jameis Winston back then if we'd known we had a crab leg station.
Boy, Jameis, he's having tough work.
Yeah, he's had a rough time. But Jared Seegers weighing in with a pretty well-timed joke there. All right, let's move on to item number 7 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And speaking of that USA Today list of top 10 quarterbacks for college football, one more SEC name on the list. Let's deal with Drew Locke here from Missouri. And in particular, there is something that Paul Meyerberg writes about Locke that I think is pretty interesting in terms of maybe good player, maybe not the best results overall for Missouri. Let me show you Meyerberg on Drew Locke here for a moment. He says, on the one hand, Locke led the nation with 44 touchdowns a year ago. On the other hand, 18 of those scores came in games against the powerhouse defenses at Southwest Missouri State, Idaho, and Connecticut. That's Paul Meyerberg, sort of giving you both sides of the story when it comes to Missouri quarterback Drew Locke. And I can't help but think about that. This is a guy that's going to compile big numbers against mediocre competition like that. Some of it also coming in blowout losses to other SEC teams. This is not a contender in the SEC East. Even some of the SEC East teams that I think of as somewhat middling, I still have Missouri ranked behind most of them. Can you be a great quarterback if you don't even play on a good team?
That's the question Drew Locke is asking everybody, right? Please give me the praise.
Right.
And it's going to get even harder, right? Because we've talked about Derek Dooley, a ton on this team, and I think you can be. I think the opportunity is there. Now, is it harder to make your presence felt, especially on a national scene? Absolutely. But I think there are guys that can do it. I mean, we've seen guys, back in the 90s, early 2000s. You've seen, Brett Favre drafted out of Southern Miss.
Yeah.
You've seen Steve McNair out of some of these other places. It's possible to do it. I just don't know if Drew Locke is, what's the right word I'm looking for here? Trustworthy enough, possibly?
Yeah.
We asked the question, hey, is Tua going to try to do too much? I don't think there's any doubt that Drew Locke's going to try to do too much.
And listen, let's be honest here for a moment. This is the guy that completed like 55% of his passes a year.
Like a conference play, like 51.
Yeah.
Like it was like not even.
I mean, he is the worst example. And this is going to sound like I'm just piling on Drew Locke. I don't mean for this to sound this way. I don't like stat compilers, right?
Yeah.
He is such a compiler. Right? He's just like, touchdown here, touchdown there, yards here, yards there. Yeah. He's a high-volume shooter. He's the football version of a high-volume shooter, doing a lot of this stuff against bad teams. I have zero use for Drew Locke. You can take all those mock drafts and you can share them with somebody else. I don't care about mock drafts. I don't care who drafts in the NFL. I'm interested in who can win games at the SEC level. He may one day be very good for the LA Chargers or the Kansas City Chiefs, something like that. That'll be for somebody else to worry about on a different show. I care about who can win games in the SEC, and Drew Locke can't.
No, and I completely agree with you. And you're probably going to laugh at me about this, and you're probably going to disagree with me about this. But
right.
One Bama fan actually asked me this question yesterday. If you had to pick a starting quarterback for Alabama in 2018, did you pick Jalen Hurts or Drew Locke? I'm going with Jalen Hurts all day. I'm going with Jalen Hurts, and it's not even close. I'm going with
I think
Jalen
you
Hurts.
found one of the quarterbacks I would take Drew Locke.
I know, but to me, it's all
for
about
Alabama.
Yeah, no. To me, though, it's all about what you're doing with the football at Alabama. We've talked about this before. Who's going to throw an interception? Who's not?
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts threw one interception last year, and that's the reason, in my opinion, he was able to take Alabama so far. And the reason he stayed the starting quarterback for so long was that he did have that one interception, was not turning the ball over.
Our buddy Dwayne Rourke in the comment section. By the way, Dwayne, good luck to your Omahags there as they get ready to try to wrap up this College World Series. Dwayne Rourke says that the Alabama new cafeteria is not as nice as the new Arkansas cafeteria.
Yeah, that's possible.
Listen, Arkansas is spending that Walmart money. I have no idea they got.
We said that when they were looking for a head coach.
Yeah.
Like, hey, listen, if you're the Boosters, right? And the Boosters did this. They ousted Jeff Long, and then they ousted Brett Bielema. It's like, hey, put your money where your mouth is. If you're at Arkansas and your Boosters, same with Texas A&M. Texas A&M has done that. Arkansas is next up to be able to get it done. I have no doubt that listen, there's good facilities all around the SEC. There's no doubt about it. I think what the cool part about that kind of inside look was how are they showing it off, and that's one of the things I think Bama's doing well at right now.
All right, let's do item number 8 here on our SEC country.
I do want to bring up one more thing. I'm
Please,
sorry.
my goodness. My goodness.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
This guy's decided to take over the show, by all means.
Well, Philo Beto brought up a good point in the comment section a minute ago on YouTube, and I did want to touch on this because I think it's an interesting topic. It said, I thought the NCAA got rid of athletics-only dorms and dining halls in the late 90s. My understanding is they have to make these things open to regular students. This is an interesting topic for people that don't understand this.
Please explain this.
Bama is like dorms and football facilities, and it's like this all over the SEC, and most people don't realize it. They can't. They have to be open to other people, but it doesn't have to be open to everybody. Mm-hmm. So what you can say is, and Bama's dorms are like this, probably the chow hall is just like this too. This is for athletes, this is for football players, and law students. Right, this is for athletes and engineers. This dorm right here is going to be for athletes only, and then also the Crimson Cabaret. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a way of skirting the rules.
What is the Crimson Cabaret? Tell me more about that.
I don't know. It's like, the
all of a sudden our buddy Schlab over there perked up when you started bringing that up.
Halftime dancers and all that stuff. It's but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's crazy the way they kind of skirt these rules.
They also changed the rule, and listen. I don't know the rules. For somebody that lives his whole life obsessed with college football, I know less about the rules than anybody knows. It's really kind of bizarre how little I understand about the rules. But they also changed it recently where it used to be a cap on how much food a football player could get, and now there is no cap.
Yeah.
And so I think that makes stuff like this a little more, I don't know if relevant's the right word, or useful. All of a sudden now, you can just keep going back over and over again. This is an option available to football players that wasn't available too long ago because there was a cap on how much food you could eat.
Right. You had I think we got 10 meals a week when I was in school. It's like, hey, you can come get breakfast and lunch, or you can come get lunch
I've seen Mike eat. He can eat 10 meals in one sitting.
Right. Hey, listen, nobody's ever told me I'm putting down too much food, but it is interesting though to look at some of the inside techniques, because you're right. Now you can go on a Saturday and get a steak for lunch at the dining hall. It's not the same rules as it used to be.
All right, let me do item number 8 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and I can already tell you, I'm going to get yelled at about this one. This is going to be self-serving on my part. I totally get that. Doesn't mean that I'm wrong, though. Trayvon Walker is a 5-star defensive tackle from the state of Georgia. Now, it just so happens that he's probably Georgia's #1 recruiting target here for the class of 2019. He's at least one of the 2 or 3 most coveted players in the state of Georgia. But push that aside here for the moment. The real issue here is, and Keith Niebuhr, who's a very good reporter for 24/7 Sports, wrote about this, that Auburn is apparently recruiting Trayvon Walker, as you might expect, but also recruiting him at basketball as well. Here's the tweet from Niebuhr with a link to his story, where Niebuhr writes, Trayvon Walker is such a talent in football, he's a 5-star defensive tackle, and basketball as a power forward, that Auburn's recruiting him in both. Can the Tigers give Georgia, South Carolina, and Clemson a run? Bruce Pearl and Gus Malzahn hope so. This is such a source of irritation for me. And I got no beef with the report. I think it's good reporting on the part of Keith Niebuhr. I don't like the action. Trayvon Walker is not playing basketball at Auburn.
If he wants to. Who are we to say what he loves, though? You know what I mean? Listen, I almost love baseball more than I do football. I played football because I was obviously good at it, and I think that's what you're kind of referring to. Hey,
you're not making the major leagues in baseball.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what you're kind of referring to. But if that's what he loves to do, then that's what he should do. You know what I mean? The same thing is going on with Kyler Murray over
Hold on. If this is your son, he's a 5-star defensive tackle, and they ain't many of them, to pardon the bad grammar. If that's your son, you're going to tell him he should be, prancing around with Bruce Pearl at Auburn when he's got a chance to go play in the NFL as a defensive tackle.
Yes. I'm going to tell him to do what he wants to do.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I'm going to tell him to do what he wants to do. It doesn't help anybody if he goes to play football and he's miserable on a daily basis. Go do what you want to do. If he's got an opportunity to play both at Auburn, which is obviously what they're talking about,
they're not going to let him play basketball.
That will. They've had other two-sport athletes.
I've seen Walker play basketball. He's a good basketball player. He's a really physical, low post defensive presence, as you might imagine. But according to 24/7 Sports' own data from back in the winter, he got down to 255 playing basketball during the winter. 255 pounds. If you want to play in the NFL, you got to be in the weight room. You got to be, doing football full time. You can't be a 2-sport star and make the NFL as a defensive tackle. If you want to be, the 3rd-string quarterback and also play baseball, honestly, nobody's going to notice, nobody's going to care. But if you're trying to be the nation's #1 defensive tackle, you can't be flirting with basketball. And honestly, I love the reporting. I think Keith Niebuhr's doing a good job here. My beef is with Auburn. This is disingenuous. They know he can't play basketball at Auburn.
Grindhard's over in YouTube comment section trying to call you out. He says, BA's just mad because Rodney be kicking butt in Georgia, Derek Brown, Montravius, Big Cat, Trayvon next. What do you have to say about that?
Listen, I told you, Grindhard, and everybody else. I knew I was going to get grief for this. It comes across as totally self-serving, but it doesn't mean that I'm not wrong. In fact, an expert on this subject, Jeff Sintel at DogNation.com, who knows Trayvon Walker and his situation pretty well, sounds like he kind of agrees. Here's what he recently said to me on this subject.
Well, I would say this is simply a mid-June storyline, which I think takes place because I think Trayvon Walker was on campus at Auburn over the last week with his basketball camp. The Upson Lee basketball team is a tremendous program in the state of Georgia. I think they haven't lost a game in 2 seasons. The premise of your point is valid. I can see why there's an irritation there. The only thing that Trayvon Walker would do during the winter of his college career by playing basketball is shed a lot of weight, and that's the weight he needs to get ready to take care of the rigors of the SEC in the trenches, and also if he preps for a potential pro career. I just think it's a mid-June storyline. It's a convenient storyline with a 5-star prospect.
Lonnie Gibson, also in the YouTube comment section, says, BA, how's that defensive line recruiting down there for Georgia right now? Listen, that is a huge issue for Georgia. They've missed out on some defensive linemen. And as I said before, I'm self-aware enough to know that this comes across as a bit self-serving. I'm obviously a fan. I've never pretended not to be. And, maybe there's a chance that my sort of fandom here, impacts the way that I view this story. But the truth is, I think we all know that defensive line is a tough spot to be a two-sport star.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Trayvon Walker is going to Georgia. Man, I just hate to tell anybody that. Trayvon Walker's going to Georgia. But disingenuous recruiting for me is a problem.
I understand it, but I think that there's the opportunity there. And I think that when this kid is opened a door, and somebody's opening a door for this kid to say, hey, listen, maybe football is the reason we're opening this door for you, but at the same time, if you love basketball, we're going to open these doors for you. That's what I don't have a problem with. I mean, Keith Holcomb's a linebacker at Alabama. He's been playing baseball. He's been playing football. He's 3 years into his career, and just now he's trying to decide between sports. He's going to focus on one or focus on the other. That's fine with me. But I just think that if you love something and the door is open, you'd be dumb not to at least look in it.
So I guess the final point for me on this, for the people who are sort of saying this is all sour grapes for me on the part of being a Georgia fan, go back to our previous shows. Anytime the subjects come up of quarterback who may be shifting to wide receiver, I've said the same. I've been very consistent on this. I've told every program, stop telling these kids they're going to play quarterback and then moving them to safety the moment you get on campus. I have not wavered on that. I don't like it when these coaches fill these players' heads with a bill of goods they are not going to back up once they get there. I've said it a million times. I think you'll back me up on that.
No, I know, and I do.
It's the same thing, too, by the way, for, hey, you're a cornerback, but once we get on campus, how about you try it at safety? Or you're an offensive tackle, but now that you're here, let's give you a look at guard. All this stuff goes on, and it's not just Auburn here. There are a lot of programs that tell players exactly what they want to hear. It's not always two-sport stuff. Sometimes it's position-related. I think all of it's unfair. I think there ought to be more honesty in recruiting.
No, I agree with you on that, and I look at it and say, hey, listen, I think that if you're going to have a guy that you want to come in as a quarterback and you think might be a receiver, then you need to wait until he makes that decision for himself that he wants to move to wide receiver. Right?
Lamar Stevens says he's too short to be a power forward. It's a waste of time and energy for him to play basketball straight up. I completely agree. I don't think that – look, last thing on this. Let's say he's not a 5-star defensive tackle. You think Bruce Pearl's recruiting this guy to go play power forward at all?
No. So I don't.
So to me, that settles the argument.
No, I don't think it does. It's like I said, why not take advantage of what this door is being open for you? It's
even if it costs you a chance to play in the NFL.
Well,
which it will. If he tried to play two sports in college, he's not. If he did, it ruins his chance to play in the NFL.
That's like me saying, if I didn't play in college football, nobody would care about my opinion about Alabama or Georgia or anybody else we talk about on the show.
That's not the same analogy. Not the same analogy.
It's close. It's close.
All right, let's do item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I don't want to spend very much time on this at all, but I do think it's an important point to bring up. Nancy Armour had a column at USA Today looking at the Sports Illustrated report that kind of comes off Tyler Helinski, the brother, unfortunately, of Ryan Helinski, the quarterback prospect we talk about on the show a good bit. Tyler was at Washington State, recently committed suicide, and I guess the autopsy comes back on him that reflects CTE, which is obviously a buzz phrase in college football right now. And, Armour's column at USA Today was really critical of the game of football, suggesting that it's essentially settled science that football is dangerous, and she even used the word kills there on that. I've told you before, and like I said, this is too heavy of a topic for us to spend too much time on. I've told you before, though, I'm a late adopter, right? I'm the last one to sort of join the fray on anything, including football being dangerous. I have a son. Will I let him play football? I don't know that he's going to want to, but right now I'd have no plans to restrict him playing football as an 11 or 12-year-old, as a high school kid, whatever. Maybe one day we have an army of repeated studies that prove that football truly is dangerous. Right now we have some science and some mountain of speculation around that. I hate it for the Helinski family. What a devastating thing for their family to deal with. I am not ready to join the throngs that say football is somehow dangerous and it needs to be extra regulated on some sort of nuclear scale. I'm just not there yet, Mike.
No, and this is obviously a subject that's close to me because it's something that I'm involved in. It's a risk that I might be exposed to and might not. But I think when you look at it and break it down, it's just one of those things where society sometimes focuses on something that is the hot button. It's like, hey, this may or may not be doing this, but we need to be careful about it. we still drink alcohol on a daily basis. We still get in cars that kill hundreds of thousands of people. And football has brought so many positives into my life that it's hard to focus on the negatives at this point for me. So I agree with you.
And listen, I'm not at a point where I'm going to say that I'm never changing my mind. This is not one of those deals where I've drawn a line in the sand and I'm never altering my position. As more information becomes available, obviously I'll have to deal with what's out there. But things have a way of softening over time. Things have a way of not quite seeming so dire once you have a chance to really see all the information that's out there. And I think there's a chance that still ends up being true with football here too.
Well, and that's what's crazy is we don't really know. Hey, there's evidence of CTE. Well, did that cause somebody to kill themselves? I mean, we don't know really, how all these things kind of interact with one another, and so that's why it makes me nervous, to think like that. And obviously, I'm not out of the woods, like I just said in the YouTube comment section. This could be something that affects you in your 60s or your 50s or your 40s. I'm not out of the woods in any means. But I'm with you in saying that I need more studies if I'm going to make a decisive kind of answer on that kind of thing.
I think the one thing we can all agree with, whether it's Mike or me sitting here or anyone watching or listening to the show right now, our prayers go out to the Helinski family and really so many of these stories that seem to be kind of piling up here as of late. Just horrible to think about what certain families, including the Helinskis, are having to deal with. We certainly send prayers out to them. No easy way to transition off of that. But let's try our best here for item number 10 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And, Jeremy Pruitt has done his best to compile a big staff together there at Tennessee. A lot of well-known names from playing days, coaching days in the SEC. An example of that is Tracy Rocker, who was one of the great players in Auburn history. And that's not an exaggeration.
Right.
Tracy Rocker is one of the greatest players in Auburn history. And he's also been a good and well-known SEC coach for a while. And now he's working with the staff there at Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt. And one of the cool things that Tennessee's done here this offseason is give you a little bit of a window into these coaches, both in terms of what they're like on the practice field and kind of what they're like behind closed doors, the message they want to send to their Tennessee players when they have their undivided attention. For Tracy Rocker, it's all about leadership. Here's a little taste of him with his message to the Vols players. Take a look at this.
This is where it's going to all start. It goes back to respect, an act of giving a particular attention to a high and special regard. Respect is not something handed to you when you take the field. Respect is something you build over time through hard work. For us, this is where it's going to start. We're in this building, and we're here. Everybody in here want to have respect for each other. I respect you, you respect me, but the respect in this game comes in, it starts here, then we got the cat across the street.
So that's good stuff there from Tracy Rocker weighing in on the situation with Tennessee. And I guess my question to you about this would be, is respect, and I know that seems like a cliche, but in this case it really does matter, is respect harder to come by, player to player, player to coach, coming off a winless season in the SEC? I mean, morale's a thing, right? The place where you work, is the morale good or not? You may not even speak about it too much, but you just sort of instinctively know. It's almost a guarantee that the Tennessee morale had to have been low when Jeremy Pruitt and this new staff came on board here. How much more difficult is gaining respect going to be given the fact that they got clobbered a year ago?
No, it's going to be tough. And obviously that's one of the things you want to establish as a new regime or as Jeremy Pruitt coming in, there's a new coaching staff. Hey, we need to establish respect. We need to do all these things. It has to be built from the ground up. And I think that's what some of these meetings are doing that we've highlighted from Tennessee. They're trying to build that morale. They're trying to say, hey, listen, and we talked about it, the team together, everyone achieves more. They are starting from ground zero, trying to build that foundation and build that back up. I think it has to start in the summer, but there's a long road ahead of them. Like you kind of mentioned, it's not that easy to do. And it comes small steps at a time, and then all of a sudden you'll look back and say, hey, listen, people weren't that happy to be playing us on the football field on Saturdays.
All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Always good to have you with us here today on SEC Country Live. And, we're always looking to close the show the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life. Today it comes from the ranks of the NBA. And I've always kind of fashioned myself to a pretty good pop-a-shot player. In fact, I think we've actually talked about that here on SEC Country Live before, that I feel like I'm probably pretty good at this. This video maybe makes me think maybe I'm not quite as good as I think, because I want you to see Golden State Warrior star Klay Thompson. Now, he is in China, I believe, here as a part of a goodwill tour of some sorts. And he's actually getting just, laid waste to by a young girl here in Pop-A-Shot. Now, Thompson's got the nice touch, but look how quick this girl is getting him up and firing him up there. I feel like that I'm pretty good putting the ball in the basket, but I don't quite have this consistency. I mean, she's just getting the shots up.
It's just like such a nice backspin, just getting the roll every time.
Michael, can you shoot and pop a shot that fast? I can't get him up that fast.
She
Can you
is
shoot
an
that
absolute
fast?
machine, man. She's an absolute machine. It's
she is just blistering Klay Thompson.
almost like a cartoon or something.
She's like the third Splash brother.
Yeah.
Splash sister, maybe? Anyway, check out the podcast. It's going to be up for you on the various podcast channels. We're back tomorrow again at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being with us. Y'all make doing this show a blast. I'm so glad we have a chance to share this time together. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for another episode of SEC Country Live.